Welcome to Let's Talk Investing, a co-production of the Globe and Mail and the Investor Education Fund. I'm Rob Carrick, personal finance columnist at the Globe and Mail, and with me is Don Drummond. Don is chief economist at Toronto Dominion Bank. Don, let's talk about government deficits and taxes. The federal government is projecting a deficit of $50 billion plus. The Ontario government is projecting a deficit of $20-odd billion. How confident are you that the governments can rein in these deficits without having to raise taxes in one way or another?
Well, let's start with the federal first. In my view, if they limited the growth of their spending to about 2% a year, they could get away and return the balanced budget by 2015 or 2016 without raising taxes. So do they have the will? Do they have the power to get spending down to 2%? And that might not sound like a terribly heroic number, but keep in mind with 1% population growth, 2% inflation, that's actually a slight decline in real per capita terms.
Okay, so the government keeps a modest increase on its spending, excuse me, and that allows them to, in an orderly, gradual fashion, to reduce the deficit. You've worked in the finance department, Don. How realistic is it that the government might be able to keep spending, a lid on spending at 2%?
Well, I think it's a lot harder than you might think at first surface. First of all, they have said that they would not touch transfers to seniors and they would not touch the major transfers to provinces. That's 50% of spending, and that 50% is going to grow at about 5%. So the math is pretty simple. If you got to get to 2%, the other 50%'s got to decline by 1%. Like, that's not even the ballpark of what was done in the mid-1990s, but it's totally different than the last 10 years. The last 10 years, that spending has grown at 6% a year.
All right, so the government's really going to have to change its spending habits drastically to shield me, the taxpayer, from tax increases.
It is one of the, you talk about the difficulty of doing it, it is one of the hardest things for a politician to do it, because you run for office and you get elected with an ambition to do certain things, and you're basically signing up for a 4-year time period where you're virtually going to do nothing.
Right, and if they limit the increase in spending at 2%, they're going to have to be cutting in other areas to account for the areas that need increased spending. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. They will have to take money from other things in order to protect seniors and the transfers to the provinces. And yeah, they'll probably go after the Department of Defense budget, but until we're out of Afghanistan, not much will come out of there. Do
you see the spending cuts having a trickle-down effect to the taxpayer in terms of the government's not being able to pay for certain things they paid for before, and another level of government is going to say, sorry, we need to charge you more because that service which was previously covered is no longer covered, and that's almost like a backdoor tax increase?
Yes, there will be, but let's also come back to my statement. This is nothing like it was in the 1990s. I mean, it was massive devolution of responsibilities implicitly from the federal government to the provinces.
You're talking about the way when the Liberal government finally...
I mean, they cut spending 15% over a 3-year time period.
Okay. So you're seeing nothing nearly as drastic as what was required last time to bring the deficit
down? No, I think that was a near crisis situation. It is worrying right now, but these deficits and these debt burdens, well, let's just take the debt burden. The net debt burden will probably hit 35% of the size of the economy. It hit 69% in 1995. Wow. It's nowhere near the magnitude of problem.
Okay, well, you've given me reason not to be too concerned about tax increases then. Thanks, Don.
Okay.